I am going to invite Dee to the stage as we get her presentation ready. I have known Dee for quite some time, so it is an honor for me to introduce her. With over 25 years of experience in Texas public education, Dee joined Hilco Partners back in 2019. She focuses on state and federal assessment and accountability and policy practice that represents the assessment and accountability interest of the largest school districts in Texas. Prior to her work with Hilco, Dee taught middle school math, served as a mathematics curriculum coordinator, and a supervisor in an accountability and school improvement with both Austin ISD and Houston ISD. Dee remains focused on helping campuses and districts use data to improve teaching, learning, and student achievement by providing information, advocacy, and most important, action. Dee is here today to give us a framework for our conversations, a glimpse of how our assessment and accountability systems work, how the systems coexist with both federal requirements and state requirements, and actually a glimpse to how technical these systems really are. My background is school finance. It's a complex system. Assessment and accountability is so much more complex than that. And that's why Dee is up here giving an assessment and accountability 101 instead of me. So welcome to the stage, Dee Carney.
Thank you, Bob. Good morning. When Bob called and said, hey, would you be willing to help be our consultant for this new initiative for Raise Your Hand Texas? And those of you who know me, those of you who I've had an opportunity to work with know I'll talk to anybody, anytime, anywhere about accountability. And I said, absolutely, welcome to the fray. And that's what accountability and assessment has been and continues to be. My grandfather was a World War II bomber pilot, and his plane, like thousands of others during the war, was shot down on a mission run over Germany. This was a critical problem for the Center for Naval Analysis during the war. The naval researchers knew they needed to solve this problem, and they quickly went to work. After each mission, the bullet holes and the damage from each bomber was painstakingly reviewed and recorded, and the researchers pored over the data looking for vulnerabilities. Eventually, the data began to show a clear pattern. Most damage was to the wings and body of the plane. The solution to their problem was clear: increase the armor on the plane's wings and body. However, before the planes were changed or modified to increase the armor, a Hungarian Jewish statistician named Abraham Wald, who escaped the Nazi-occupied Austria, he was working in New York with the other academics. He noticed there was a flaw in their analysis. The researchers had only looked at the planes that had returned. Missing from the data was my grandfather's plane and the thousands of others who had been shot down. The researchers' bullet hole data had in fact created a map of the exact places a bomber could be shot and still survive. With the new analysis in hand, crews reinforced the bomber's cockpit, engines, and tail armor. And the result was fewer fatalities and greater success of bombing missions. It seems we have a similar problem in education with the analysis of our current accountability system data. When that data gives us the wrong solution. Dr. Brian Gill said it very well when he said, for example, a low rate of proficiency in grade 3 reading suggests that students need additional support to read proficiently. It does not necessarily mean the school is underperforming in serving its students because they might be learning rapidly from a very low starting point. Conversely, a high rate of proficiency does not necessarily mean a school's enhancing students' learning if they started out as high-performing students. And just like Abraham Wald, perhaps we need to look at our current accountability system and see what is included and what is missing. And to do that, let's quickly see how we got here. Oops. In 1979, the 66th Texas legislature instituted the first statewide testing program, acronym TABS. Follow along with me. It stands for the Texas Assessment of, say that again, of what? Basic skills, absolutely. There are the grades that were tested. There were the subjects that were tested. There were no accountability ratings issued. And you can see which party was in power at that time. 6 years later, TEAMS came into play as the second statewide assessment system. TEAMS, the acronym stands for the Texas Educational Assessment of Minimal Skills, the M, minimal skills. You'll notice this is the first and only time in the statewide assessment program we actually tested first graders. And it's also the first time we had an exit level test that was required for our 11th grade students to receive a high school diploma. Notice no accountability ratings. Notice which political party was at play. The third standardized test in Texas was called TAS. I know you're going to get this one. The Texas Assessment of Academic Skills. There you go. There you go. Notice when we started TAS in 1990, we administered it in the fall. 3 years later, we switched that to the spring. We added new grade levels. We added new tests. We dropped exit level down to grade 10, and boom, 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 boom. You can see all the different versions that came in rapid succession during the TAS. Also during that year, 1993, started the first accountability rating system. Now we could do this because we had a longitudinal data system created in PEAMS. We also had the TEAKS, and now we had a test that was aligned to all of that. We had 4 ratings: exemplary, recognized, acceptable, and unacceptable. And there are some campuses where I have visited that still have these on their wall. Just really quickly, if you don't know, that 90% outside of that meant to receive an exemplary rating, 90% of all students and each student group had to pass that test, pass those tests. That was an exemplary rating. Recognized 80%. We phased in acceptable over time, 50, 55, is 5 percentage point increases over time. And those of you taking notes, thinking about what can we change about our current system, maybe there's something here that captures your attention. Interesting to note, in 1995, the 74th legislature created PEG, the Public Education Grant. We still use that today. And it's for families who choose, they can move their child to another school if their current school is on the PEG list. The PEG list, the criteria changes. Right now, it's if there's an F in the student achievement domain and an F in the school progress domain. But it's changed over time. Federal accountability came in play. 2001, No Child Left Behind. You had 2 labels, met or missed AYP. So yes, you could be acceptable and missed AYP. And then the goal of No Child Left Behind was to have 100% proficiency by 2013-14. Here's what TAS performance looked like over that decade. This is reading, language arts. There's math. Yeah. And here's what the accountability ratings look like over that time period. And I've only circled 2 for you. The extreme ends, looking at exemplary, going from 60 campuses to almost 2,000 campuses, and low performing, going from 54 to 166. Tax, Texas Assessment of, you're more comfortable with that one. Got it. Got it. Knowledge and skills, right? We phased in those standards over 2 years. We had a 2-year phase in for the standards. We had a different test for ELs, a different test for our students with disabilities. We kept the rating system. And it's interesting to note that in 2007, and I'm wanting you to watch as you taking on this advocacy message, watch the cross section of politics and policy, because they're there. In 2007, the legislature created the Select Committee on Accountability. In 2011, the legislature cut $5 billion with a B dollars from Texas education budget. At the same time, they passed Senate Bill 1031, which required our high school students to take and pass 15 EOCs, and each EOC would count 15% of the student's final course grade. That was enough to make me leave the school district, doing the work that I love, and get closer to the Capitol to work on academic data analytics and try to influence policy and change. In 2011, no state was reaching proficiency, and waivers began being administered for the No Child Left Behind. Remember, dotted line is TOS, solid line is tax. So you can see the trend lines for reading ELA. And this is, by the way, all grades, all students. Here's math. There's your accountability ratings. Again, noticed exemplary and academically unacceptable. Now let's move into the present day test. STAR. Here we go. What does it stand for? Yeah, you read really well, but if I had covered that up, most of you would not have known. When we started STAR 2012, first of all, there was no accountability rating because we were transitioning to the new test. But when we started it, 3 through 8 tests were like they are now, except high schoolers still had those 15 EOCs. Thank goodness in 2013, we reduced those from 15 EOCs to 5. Remember those wonky passing standards? You had level 2 phase in 1, and then there was really 1.5. And then we went to 2, and we never reached 3, but there was also final recommended and level 3 advanced. We had a different accountability system set up, right? We had 2 ratings, either met standard or improvement required, and it was based on 4 indexes. Now we're looking at expanding measures, expanding metrics, especially in that post-secondary readiness, right? This was a busy, busy time. 2013, certainly we appreciated the work many of you in this room did on House Bill 5 and reducing those EOCs from 15 to 5. The 84th Texas Legislature in, in 2015, let me get some water. Thank you, Charles. Greg Abbott ran on a campaign promise of creating a Texas Achievement District. Thank you. Which would, basically take the 15 lowest performing elementary schools away from those districts and put them into another achievement district run by someone appointed by the commissioner. We also heard about opportunity districts, something similar. Neither one of those ideas passed. House Bill 2804, that brought in the A through F ratings, and for a little bit, we had 5 domains on the books, right? In statute, we were going to have 5 domains, including, and I know our accountability experts online and in the room are going to remember this one, the Community and Student Engagement Survey. Yeah. We also had what if ratings and the commission on the next generation of assessment and accountability, which Dr. Teresa Trevino, I'm sure will talk to you more about in her panel. She was on that commission. House Bill 1842 brought some new terminology to to our campuses that were struggling with performance, campus improvement teams, turnaround plans, and for a campus that was 5 years unacceptable or more, the commissioner was required to replace the locally elected trustees with the board of managers or order closure. And a highlight, Senate Bill 149 by Senator Seliger created the IGCs. And each of you working with high schools know the critical role that the individual graduation committees have played in helping your students graduate from high school. In 2016, Lexiles were linked to STAR reading. We had new versions of the online versions for STAR accommodated tests. The passing standards were changed again. This time approaches grade level, meets grade level, and master's grade level. And you know what happened in 2020, the testing was canceled. House Bill 22 brought around a new accountability system. We kept the A through F ratings. That's the definitions, and don't they look familiar? We didn't get too far from those, did we? Now it's based on 3 domains, and in 2020 we had not rated due to the no testing, right? And the declared disaster. Interesting to note, in House Bill 22, that was at then House Public Education Chairman Dan Huberty, Larry Taylor from the Senate, 3 domains. It also includes a local accountability system that TEA approves if you choose to go down that path. And it brought Senate Bill 1882, which are charter partnerships. If a low-performing campus wants to partner with a charter, you get a waiver for 2 years from accountability. We've had a little dust up in 2019 about commissioners' proposed rules not matching legislative intent around DNF campuses. We seem to have that resolved with this past legislative session, thanks in large part to the work by David Thompson and H.D. Chambers, who are here today. And then in the federal accountability side, Every Student Succeeds Act. When you look at House Bill 22, I just want to stop here just for a minute because a lot of people don't realize, again, at this intersection of politics and policy. This is the, what do you call these, Michelle? What a candidate puts out, or what a legislator puts out to his fellow members on the floor to talk about the bill they're getting ready to talk about. This is the House version of the bill. This is Representative Huberty's write-up of the bill. And notice at the top, it passed the House 146-0. That's due to large part by Representative Huberty and Vice Chair at that time, Representative Diego Bernal out of San Antonio, and Speaker Strauss and the work they did to get this bill to the floor and passed unanimously. But notice some of the interesting pieces of it that the House voted on. It removed a summative A through F rating. STAR tests were limited to 50%. And it differentiated between D and F ratings. But also, notice the 3rd domain. It's a school climate domain. And it includes all those indicators, Libby, you were throwing up here that people said that they wanted. Now, this version of the bill passed 146-0. The Senate version did not agree. The Senate had the closing the gaps domain. The House did not accept the Senate version. It went to conference committee. And at the end of the day, the school climate domain was gone. The additional indicators of the school progress domain were gone. And you have the system that we have today. When that was released in 2017, you had a variety of opinions because that what if report came out, and that what if report told people, if we had an A through F system in 2018, this is what your campus would score. Superintendents clearly align with the messaging that Raise Your Hand is using today. When you focus on one day and time, right? That letter grade does not tell you all the great things that we do in public education. There's Teresa Trevino again, Commissioner Scott, and H.D. Chambers there. The parent's perspective, it certainly doesn't tell if your school is safe, if it has access to arts and PE, all important to parents. And then you had other legislators taking a perspective that those low school grades are an argument for school choice. Interesting to note, this was in 2017 when the Lieutenant Governor was speaking to the Texas Public Policy Foundation. But in 2017, that legislative session is the last time we've had a vote on school vouchers in the Senate. Here's what it looks like. Remember, dotted line TOS, solid line tax, red line star. This is ELA. Before we hit the COVID cliff. There's math. Now, accountability, when we've got two different rating systems here under STAR. The first one was met standard or improvement required. And then the A through F system. Those are from 2019. We don't have ratings from 2020. And in 2021, there were only 88 campuses that were eligible to 28 out of 1,100 DNF rated campuses were eligible. They met the agency's criteria to be evaluated in 2021. So those percentages and those numbers aren't going to change much for 2021. At this point, most people start asking questions. The number one question that I get is, how much does Texas spend on STAR testing? I'm not going to steal Tyson Kane's thunder. I'm sure he'll have that number for you. But the Texas Tribune certainly did a report on the new testing contract, about $388 million for the online testing. The second frequently asked question I get is, what tests does ESSA and USDE require? What do we have to give under the federal system? We have to annually test students according to ESSA in math and reading in grades 3 through 8, one in grades 10 through 12, right? And you can go in those bands. We also have to do science testing in those bands as well, at least one time. What is not required? Grade 8 social studies, US history, a second English EOC, and certainly high stakes are not required. EOCs do not have to be included for graduation tests. We've just done it a really long time in Texas. So who's left? And Teresa, Dr. Trevino, this is your graphic, right? 11 states still require high school exit exams, and they're in green. The gold states are the states that no longer require exit exams, and the gray states never required them at all. The third most commonly asked question we get is, do you have to use letter grades as accountability ratings labels? Absolutely not. You do not. ESSA does require states to use some kind of differentiated label, right? Some kind of label that differentiates performance, but Texas is one of 13 states that use an A through F label. Other states use stars, or they use descriptive words. Some even use ESSA's labels themselves. Where are those 13 states? Let's overlay them on top of this particular graphic. And there they are. Many of those are states that still require exit levels, but not all. Thank you. That is perfect. Last frequently asked question, how are Texas A through F letter grades calculated? Well, then I have to turn and give you Dr. John Tanner, who you'll hear from later today, the best answer of all. The first time I heard you, John, this is the slide that I took away. It's not clear, it's not transparent, it creates confusion. Educators can't explain the difference between a C or a D, except, John, I made one correction. Whatever state you were in, there was a 60-page accountability manual, and in Texas, it's a 200-page accountability manual. It's not clear. We know the accountability system is undergoing a reset. The agency intends to publish the new frameworks in May. They've started conversations with 2 of their advisory committees, the Accountability Technical Advisory Committee. By the way, there's 20 service center regions in the state. Every service center region has a technical advisory person. APAC, the Policy Advisory Committee, has superintendents, business leaders, education groups. They're having conversations. They started in October. Their next meeting is in February. Frameworks are to be released in May. So what does it look like? What will this new system look like? Well, here's what we know now. I'm going to show you the base system, not the 200-page accountability manual, I promise. All right? We could, but no, not today. I'll show you the base system, and then I'll quickly show you right now what the agency has released as potential ideas. These are publicly available documents on the website. Tyson will talk to you about the STAR redesign and the new test. So we know there'll be a new test. There's 3 domains. For those of you who don't know, it's student achievement, school progress, and closing the gaps domain. The overall calculation is you get 70% of a score comes from domain 1 or domain 2, whichever is the better score. 30% of it comes from closing the gaps domain. In the first domain, I want you to watch the weighting so you can compare it to what the agency is proposing as a reset idea. For elementary and middle schools, domain 1 is 100% based on STAR at approaches, meets, and masters. You get 1 point for approaches, 1 point for meets, and 1 point for masters. High schools, you get STAR, CCMRs, and graduation rates. The reset ideas, again, these are only in October. There may be more ideas coming in February. This is what we know now. Rescaling cut points to align with the 21 and 22 STAR. Going to incorporate the programs of study and industry-based. That's now in statute due to House Bill 773. I know accountability experts, you're looking at that one about the National Guard enlistment data. All right, we still don't have military data yet, but it's there. The plan is there. Under that second domain, there's actually 2 pieces to it. Academic growth, all based on STAR, reading and math, or relative performance, STAR, but it looks into and takes into account the percentage of economically or educationally disadvantaged students enrolled at a campus and makes a relative performance score. Grades on a curve, if you will. The agency at this point is looking at changing perhaps the way that growth metrics are calculated using transition tables rather than a growth formula. And school progress is pretty much going to stay the same. Speaking of surveys, Libby, in December 2016, the education agency put out a survey to ask Texans what did they want in the ESSA plan for the school quality measure, because in ESSA, every school has to have a school quality measure. 29,000 Texans responded to that survey, including 1,000 students. Here was the question: what should Texas adopt for its measure of school quality or school success? Now, before I tell you, really quickly, turn to your shoulder partner or lean across the table and tell them what you think the top 3 choices from 29,000 Texans were for a school quality measure. You only get 30 seconds. Go. All right, time please. And the answers are, the survey answer says, number 1, career and technical training with 12,700 responses. Number 2, student engagement with the 12,300 responses. And number 3, the school climate and safety, 11,000. Coming in at 4 is arts opportunities, 5, educator engagement, 6, advanced coursework, 7, graduation rates, and 8, attendance. That's what Texans said they wanted for the ESSA domain for school quality measure. So it was a little surprising to see this. These are the indicators, these are the metrics, and these are the weights in the ESSA domain. Academic achievement, star, meets grade level on reading and math. Academic growth, star, reading and math. English language proficiency, you have to have that. That's required in ESSA. But the school quality measure did not match any of the survey. The school quality measure currently in ESSA, in Texas ESSA plan, is the student achievement domain score, which you will recall for elementary and middles is 100% star. In high schools, academic achievement, except we use graduation rates, English language proficiency, and the school quality measure is CCMRs. If you don't know, if you don't work on a campus or in a district, you may not realize that ESSA requires you to disaggregate and have targets for each of your student groups. That's what it looks like. For a very diverse campus, for a very diverse elementary or a middle school, you could have up to 71 targets to hit. High schools, districts, 50 plus targets to hit. The reset ideas the agency proposed in October, changing the way that the student group targets, they're considering using a 0 to 4 scale rather than a straight yes or no, including perhaps chronic absenteeism as a school quality metric. We'll see. Again, next meeting is in February. Let's jump to the future really quickly. What are other states doing? That's usually frequently asked question number 5. What are other states doing? Well, grabbing it from the headlines, Florida is moving to, at least their governor says they're going to end standardized testing. They're going to go to a BOY, MOY, EOY format, but it's still standardized testing. It's just 3 times a year. And you have to aggregate that one score for ESSA. Okay, you got to aggregate that score when they're ready to talk about it. Now in Illinois, they already had plans to go to a BOY, MOY, EOY, and their legislators are saying, nope, we don't want to go there. 20 years of standardized testing has not moved us where we want to go. And Illinois legislators don't think testing 3 times a year for standardized statewide testing is a good idea. New Mexico repealed their A through F ratings and they're building a different accountability system. In Idaho, they're concerned about the war on public education leading to businesses choosing not to come to Texas. Chris, I think we need to have a conversation about that. We got a whole lot of businesses coming to Texas. Right? What kind of schools do those workers they're going to be recruiting want to have? And in Kentucky is a part of ESSA's innovative assessment program. And under their new commissioner, they're looking at creating a more equitable system of assessment and accountability by looking at self-identified needs of the community. In Indiana's State Board of Education decides their accountability system, and they want a more holistic view of school performance. They're looking at advanced coursework for middle schools and high schools, employability credentials, FAFSA completion forms, extracurricular, co-curricular activities. We'll see. We'll see what Indiana's doing. Michelle, Bob, and Libby all referred to, in Texas, there are multiple groups that are involved in policy, advocacy, and politics around accountability. Here are a few that you'll consistently see at the Capitol. Of course, John Tanner, you'll hear from him later, and John will tell us why test-based accountability must be replaced with something better. He can show you it actually exists. His work with TASA and TPAC started his journey down the true accountability path. On the other end of the spectrum is the Texas Public Policy Foundation, who are very happy with the A through F accountability system. TSA, the Texas School Alliance, we work with 44 of the largest districts in the state, almost 3 million students. Over half are English learners and almost half are educationally disadvantaged students. Texas 2036, the president and CEO of Texas 2036 is former Commissioner Margaret Spellings. In an August interview, it was terrific. She talked about a very intriguing idea that I had never heard before, which is, how do you help high schools? How do you make high schools more like community colleges? I think that could have some potential for some of our high schools. This particular group, Texas 2036, relies a lot on NAEP data. We haven't talked about NAEP, Bob. That might be a separate topic for another day. But NAEP data in Ms. Spelling's President's report that was released on Friday, she says, she includes in her report, Texas has become one of the lowest performing states. Students in Mississippi, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, California, Virginia, and North Carolina are reading at higher levels than Texas students. That's from NAEP data. We haven't given NAEP since 2019 either. TAMSA, we have a couple of our representatives here from TAMSA, definitely grassroots organization that has enabled and made change. And these three organizations, Commit, Children at Risk, and the George W. Bush Institute, all serve on the APAC, the Policy Advisory Committee. Everyone believes their position is correct. And there's Raise Your Hand with one of the best infographics ever from last session. More than one test on one day. So, as we wrap up, we have unintended consequences in our accountability system, and these are opportunities for improvement to make a fair, just, equitable system. Let's look at what those are. First, the agency has, back in October, released the new data around the impact of the pandemic. And you can clearly see the difference in student performance between economically disadvantaged students and non-economically disadvantaged students at each of those proficiency levels. So one question we have, right? And as we're going on 21 months and counting of disrupted learning, is will this A through F accountability system reset recognize that not all students start from the same place academically? Here's an example. If you didn't know it, our current Secretary of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona, was the former commissioner of Connecticut. Here's Connecticut's ESSA plan. It's advertised a broad set of 12 indicators, provides a more holistic, multi-factor perspective. And look what they include. The check marks, they have specific indicators for high need students. So it's not just all students, but built into their system is outcome-based equity indicators, not funding, Michelle. Outcome-based equity indicators. Underlined are indicators other than test scores. Notice at the bottom, arts access, PE, physical fitness, post-secondary entrance, on track for high school graduation, looking at course credits for kids over time. They include chronic absenteeism. Released in November, If you haven't seen it yet, the Future Ed Group out of Georgetown University released this report that examines this interesting movement of changing the narrative and pushing for new equity measures that challenge the traditional definitions of a good school. It includes Tulsa, Oklahoma's Child Equity Index, which tracks the influences of a community. It includes, excuse me, the public impact and education analytics. They've created this algorithm just of all kinds of indicators, trying to find, the question they're trying to answer is, which high need schools are helping high need students? And the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine recommend no fewer than 16 different categories. It's pretty amazing when you look at this push for new equity indicators. So another question to ask is, will this accountability system reset expand the traditional definitions of a good school? And of course, frequently asked question number 6 is, so what would we use? Well, Representative Mary Gonzalez has a great start here. She filed House Bill 3290. It would have added a 4th school portfolio domain to the current system, and it would look at all these various indicators, of which we realize and we recognize impact student achievement and learning. In August 2019, a week after the first campus grades were rated, I got a call from the Austin American-Statesman. Little did I know this was going to be the headlines. Do Texas school ratings measure campus success or student poverty? The graphic they include was pretty compelling. Right here, there are approximately 600 campuses that enroll less than 20% economically disadvantaged students. 82% of those campuses that enroll very few educationally disadvantaged students received an A. A few others received a B, and one received a C. Now go to the other end of the spectrum. There are 2,200 campuses that enroll 80 to 100% economically disadvantaged students. 9% received an A. High poverty campuses are disproportionately represented in the D's and F categories. So another question to ask about this accountability reset is, will it identify effective schools regardless of family income? Because right now it doesn't. Right now it tells us more about the students that are enrolled at that school than it tells us how we're improving teaching and learning. Really quickly, we did a quick internal literature review. This is not just a Texas problem. This is a national unintended consequence. We found 32 states whose accountability ratings, regardless if you use A through F or emojis or stars or whatever you want to use, 32 states' ratings correlate to family income. 11 states didn't have any research published. A couple of states delayed implementing A through F, so there's no research. But I think the caution here is, just because it's overwhelmingly seen in states, this correlation to family income does not make it acceptable. We have an opportunity to change it. We have an opportunity to correct this misunderstanding. And finally, the latest research out of Stanford University from Dr. Sean Reardon. He's doing this huge data project around educational data. His data shows that poverty is the key determinant in achievement gaps, not race, not ethnicity. And knowing that, the final question to ask is, how will the A through F accountability system adjust the closing the gaps targets? This is the data from the agency. produced for the October ATAC meeting, and watch what happens. You see the targets at the top, and then you see yes or no. They disaggregated the data. They disaggregated the data by student group, by income. And where are all the no's? Where are they? Correct. So if you are a campus serving high poverty kids, these targets coming out of 2021 weren't going to make it. How will we adjust the closing the gaps targets considering 21, 22 months of disrupted learning has disproportionately impacted our educationally disadvantaged students? Now, I'm going to bring you back to the question that we're really asking, right? Do we have the right performance measures to improve student outcomes? Because you got two different questions here. How are students doing is a different question than how do schools contribute? And right now we're trying to answer that same question using the same data, and we're getting the wrong diagnosis. We're getting the wrong solution. Bob, Libby, Michelle, Kelly, thank you for allowing me to be a part of the journey. We only have 1 minute left, so I don't know if you have any questions, but if you do, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, thank you very much.